All right, let's dive into something might not sound super exciting at first. Business ownership, transparency. But trust me, it's important stuff, especially if you're running a company in the U.S. We're talking about the Beneficial Ownership Information Report, or BOI for short.
Yep, you got it.
And the government's taking this seriously.
Yeah, there are potential penalties if you don't comply.
Exactly. So no ignoring this one, but no need to panic. We're going to break it down for you so you know exactly what to do.
Think of this deep dive as your cheat sheet to navigate the BOI report.
Okay, so let's start with the basics. What exactly is the BOI report, and why is everyone making such a fuss about it?
Well, it all boils down to the Corporate Transparency Act, which was put in place to combat financial crime.
Right.
The BOI report is essentially a way for the government to kind of lift the veil on who really owns and controls companies.
So it's kind of like shining a light on those shadowy shell companies we've all heard about. The ones that sometimes pop up in the news for not so great reasons.
Exactly. For years, these opaque ownership structures have made it easy for bad actors to hide their activities. Whether it's money laundering, tax evasion, or other illicit dealings, the BOI report aims to make that much harder.
Makes sense. More transparency, less opportunity for shady business. Now, I'm thinking a lot of our listeners are probably wondering, does this apply to ME?
Right.
Who exactly needs to file this report?
It's pretty broad. If you have an LLC, partnership, corporation, or basically any company registered in a U.S. state, you'll likely need to file.
Okay. So a lot of folks are probably going to be affected by this. And just to be clear, is this a one-time thing?
Yeah.
Or do I need to file this every year?
It is a one-time filing, which is good news.
Okay.
But you do need to keep it updated. So if there are any changes to your company's ownership or address down the line, you'll need to file an amendment.
Got it. So not set it and forget it, but at least you don't have to do it annually.
Right.
Now let's get down to brass tacks. How do you actually file this thing? What are the steps?
Well, before you even think about filing, the most important thing is to gather all the necessary information about your company.
Okay.
You'll need your company's legal name, EIN, that's your tax ID number,
Right.
formation date, state of formation, and U.S. address.
Sounds pretty straightforward so far. But I have a feeling there are some potential hiccups here. What are some common mistakes people make when gathering this information?
Yeah, that's where the details can trip you up. For example, with the U.S. address, make absolutely sure it's a place where you can actually receive mail.
Yeah.
It seems obvious, but it can be tricky for foreign companies or owners, who might not have a physical presence in the U.S.
Right, like if you're using a registered agent's address, might that cause problems?
It could. They want to be able to reach you directly, so double check that you're using an address that's, actively monitored. Now, let's talk about another area where people often get confused. The company applicant.
Company applicant. Sounds mysterious. Who is this person?
It's not as complicated as it sounds. Think back to when you formed your company.
Okay.
The company applicant could be the person who filed the initial paperwork to create your business. It could be a lawyer, an accountant, or even, a service like LegalZoom.
So if I used a service like LegalZoom to set up my LLC a few years back,
yeah,
I'd need to dig up those old records to figure out who exactly filed the paperwork.
You got it. That's why it's crucial to gather all your company formation documents before you start the BOI report. It'll save you a lot of headaches later on.
Good advice. All right, let's move on to the part that everyone's probably dreading, beneficial ownership information.
Okay.
I'm guessing this is the section that gets really detailed.
It is. This is where you need to provide, specific information about the individual or individuals who ultimately own or control your company.
So we're talking full names, dates of birth, addresses, the works.
Exactly. You'll need to provide the full legal name, date of birth, residential address, even if it's a foreign address, and a copy of a valid ID, like a driver's license or passport for each beneficial owner.
Wow, so they're not messing around. They really want to know who's behind the curtain, so to speak. I'm guessing accuracy is super important here.
Absolutely. This is where things get serious. Knowingly providing false information can lead to, some pretty hefty civil or criminal penalties.
Yikes. Definitely not something to take lightly. I imagine there's also a step where you have to certify that everything you've provided is accurate.
You're right. There's a certification step where you confirm the accuracy of all the information. So double check everything, folks. Don't rush through it.
Right.
Accuracy is key.
Okay, we've covered the basics of what the BOI report is, who needs to file it, and what information you need to gather. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of the filing process itself,
Right.
let's take a quick break and come back with some tips on how to make this whole thing as painless as possible.
Sounds good. We'll be back in a jiffy with some helpful advice to streamline your BOI filing experience.
We're back and ready to tackle the actual filing process for the BOI report. Now, I know paperwork can be a bit daunting,
Right.
but hopefully, with our expert guidance, you'll feel a lot more confident.
It's all about, breaking it down into manageable steps.
Right.
First things first, you have two options for filing. You can download a PDF form from the FinCEN website, fill it out offline, and then upload it.
Okay.
Or if you prefer a more digital approach, you can file directly through their online portal.
So you have the flexibility to choose the method that works best for you.
Yeah.
Now, I'm curious about this online portal. Is it user friendly? I know some government websites can be a bit, shall we say, clunky.
It's actually been designed to be pretty straightforward. The FinCEN website has some helpful resources, including, video tutorials and FAQs that can guide you through the process.
Right.
They even have a dedicated BOI hotline if you get really stuck.
That's good to know. It sounds like they've put some effort into making this as accessible as possible.
Right.
Now let's talk about a potential time saver.
Yeah.
The FinCEN ID.
Yeah. If you anticipate filing multiple BOI reports, perhaps for different companies you own or manage,
Right.
you can request a FinCEN ID during the initial filing process.
Okay.
This unique identifier will streamline future filings and save you a lot of time and effort down the road.
So kind of like a frequent filer program for beneficial ownership reporting. Makes
Yep.
perfect sense. Now, I know we talked about the importance of accuracy,
Right.
but I'm wondering, what happens if you do make a mistake? Is there a way to correct it?
Absolutely. If you realize you've submitted incorrect information, you can file a corrected BOI report through the same online portal or by mail. The key is to, catch it as soon as possible and submit those corrections promptly.
Good to know. That's a safety net. All right, let's shift gears a bit and talk about the bigger picture here. The BOI report is obviously a significant step toward greater transparency in the business world.
Yeah.
What are some of the potential ripple effects we might see as a result of this increased transparency?
That's a great question. There are several potential implications, both positive and, well, perhaps less so, depending on your perspective. For starters, it could make it significantly harder for criminals to exploit shell companies for illicit activities. That's a big win for, law enforcement agencies trying to crack down on financial crime.
Yeah, I could definitely see how that would be a positive outcome. But are there concerns that this could also create unnecessary burdens for legitimate businesses?
Yeah.
Adding another layer of bureaucracy to an already complex system.
Yeah, it's a valid concern. There's always a balance to be struck between preventing wrongdoing and not stifling legitimate business activity. Some critics argue that the BOI report might place an undue burden on small businesses, particularly those with, complex ownership structures.
Right.
They worry it could create additional compliance costs and administrative hurdles.
Interesting point. It seems like striking that balance is going to be crucial for the long-term success of this initiative. Now, you mentioned that there might be other ripple effects. Could this increased transparency potentially impact foreign investment?
It certainly could. Some experts believe that greater transparency might actually make the U.S. a more attractive destination for foreign investment. The logic is that investors feel more confident when they have a clear understanding of who they're doing business with. Transparency reduces, risk and uncertainty, which can be a major deterrent for investors.
So it's kind of a counterintuitive outcome.
Yeah.
You might think that more regulation would scare away foreign investment.
Right.
But in this case, it could actually make the U.S. market more appealing.
Exactly. It all comes down to, trust and predictability. Now, beyond the economic implications,
Right.
there are also potential societal benefits to consider. Greater transparency could lead to more accountable business practices overall.
How so? I'm intrigued.
Well, when ownership structures are more transparent, it becomes easier to hold individuals accountable for their actions. It could potentially lead to to better corporate governance and even reduce instances of fraud or misconduct.
It's like a domino effect.
Yeah.
Transparency leading to accountability,
Right.
which could then lead to a more ethical business environment overall.
Precisely. And this movement towards transparency isn't limited to the U.S. We're seeing a global trend towards greater financial transparency. Many countries are implementing similar measures to combat financial crime and promote ethical business practices.
So the U.S. is part of a larger coordinated effort to create a more transparent and accountable global economy.
Exactly. And I think that's a very positive development.
Okay, so we've covered the nuts and bolts of the BOI report.
Right.
But we've also touched on some of the broader implications, both domestically and globally. Now, before we wrap up, I want to make sure our listeners have all the resources they need to navigate this new requirement successfully. What are some key takeaways they should keep in mind?
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground, from the nitty-gritty details of the BOI report itself to the broader implications of this push for transparency in the business world.
Right.
But before we send you off to tackle your own filings,
let's recap some key takeaways, and maybe leave you with a few things to ponder.
Sounds good. Let's distill this down to the essentials.
Okay, first things first.
Yeah.
Deadlines.
Yeah.
If your company was formed before 2024,
right,
you have until December 31st, 2024 to file your initial DOI report.
That's right. And for those of you who formed your companies in 2024 or later,
right,
you have 90 days from the date of formation to get that report filed.
So no matter when you formed your company,
right,
there's a deadline looming. Don't procrastinate.
Definitely not. And remember, you can choose to file either online through the FinCEN portal or by mail using the downloadable PDF form.
Okay.
Both options are available to you.
Now, when it comes to the information you need to gather,
right,
accuracy is paramount. Double and triple check all your company details, especially those addresses. Make sure they're correct and up to date.
And don't forget about the company applicant. That's the person or entity who filed your initial formation paperwork. You'll need to know who they are and have their contact information handy.
Right. And when it comes to the beneficial ownership section, details matter. Full names, dates of birth, addresses. Get it all right the first time to avoid any headaches later on.
And if you do happen to make a mistake, don't panic. You can file a corrected report. Just catch it early and submit those corrections promptly.
All right. So that's the practical side of things. But I think that's really fascinating about this whole BOI report situation is the potential impact it could have on the business landscape. We're talking about a shift toward greater transparency, not just in the U.S., but globally.
Yeah, it's a pretty significant development. We might see a ripple effect across various sectors. It could make it harder for criminals to operate, lead to better corporate governance, and even influence foreign investment decisions.
It makes you wonder what the long-term implications might be. Could this usher in a new era of ethical business practices? Will it reshape power dynamics in certain industries?
Those are excellent questions. And honestly, I don't think anyone has all the answers yet.
Right.
This is a dynamic situation that's still unfolding.
Exactly. It's like we're all part of a giant experiment in transparency, and we're only just beginning to see the results.
And that's what makes it so intriguing. We're not just talking about a compliance exercise here.
Right.
We're talking about a potential paradigm shift in the way businesses operate and interact with the world.
I think that's a great note to end on. It's not just about filling out a form. It's about being part of a larger movement toward a more transparent and accountable business world.
Well said. And who knows what the future holds? It'll be fascinating to see how this all unfolds.
Indeed. And as always, we encourage you to stay curious, stay informed, and keep diving deep into the topics that shape our world. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into a subject that's sure to spark your interest. Until then, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep asking those thought-provoking questions.